morning, class. My name is Jerry Martinez, and today I'm going to be speaking on the First Amendment. More importantly, how are the limitations of students' rights in illustration of the first? My claim is, how do you know when suppressing a student's freedom of expression due to your concern of their safety is justifiable? My solution is, allow for students and parents of students to be able to determine if it in fact does or if it hinders their students in public schools. Freedom of speech. We all have a general idea of what the First Amendment states, but doing my research and reading all the cases that were supplied to me, I came upon the fact that with all these cases such as Bethel School District versus Fraser, Tinker versus Des Moines, Morse versus Frederick, and Donninger versus Nighthawk, students and adults alike don't fully understand what the First Amendment means to its full extent. The First Amendment does protect your freedom of speech and expression, but you are able to say whatever you want, but you will face consequences. You can't say anything that will incite panic, and so on. A great example of freedom of expression and freedom of speech in public schools is Tinker versus Des Moines. You have a group of kids public showing of support for the truth that happened in the Vietnam War. These kids come to school wearing black armbands to show their support as to what had happened in Vietnam. They come to school and then they end up getting suspended till New Year's. They get upset and take this court to the Supreme Court, with the Supreme Court ruling a 7-2 favor in the favor of the students. A question that I pondered upon while doing my research is the limitations in school and the censoring of certain content. A great recent example of the censoring of content is what's happening right now with To Kill a Mockingbird. There has been certain schools under fire for doing a play on To Kill a Mockingbird, or a lot of people disagreeing with the fact that To Kill a Mockingbird is in fact truly beneficial to our students. And my question is, how do you know when limiting certain contents like To Kill a Mockingbird, or just ignoring the fact of slavery, or covering the Holocaust is the right way to keeping students safe and keeping the school classroom a civilized environment? In time, place, and manner is one of the rulings that would happen with Tinker versus Des Moines, was the two judges arguing over that. And for example, an example of time, places, and manner is right now, during my presentation. If Lorenzo was to start talking about why burgers were the greatest food ever invented, and he was to have a big protest right now in the middle of my presentation, and Mr. Beard was to pull him aside after class and tell him, Lorenzo, have you lost your mind? And Lorenzo turns to Mr. Beard and says, I'm just exercising my freedom of speech. My counter towards everything that I have just claimed is the Tinker versus Des Moines case again. The two judges ruled against the students due to the fact that one judge saying that the opinions aren't meant to be shared whenever, at whatever time. And another judge said that yes, though the freedom of speech is guaranteed by the First Amendment, you're not allowed to say whatever you want, whenever you want, and express whatever you want, whenever you want. And a lot of you guys might not know this, but the Vietnam War was known as the living room war. You got the introduction of televisions, and you have the first televised war. So you have students, parents, pastors, all watching this graphic content and news reports reporting on it. And that has to do the same thing with now. You have students discussing certain contents of Vietnam in the classroom, and it applies to now with, for example, the March for Our Lives. Social media does hide intentions, but it does shine light on great things. So if we were to censor the content of the hashtag March for Our Lives and suspend students for talking about March for Our Lives, we would be hindering their enlightenment and thought process of becoming greater students in the classroom, and censoring their ability to have great civilized conversations in the classrooms. And a great quote by Edward Albert, fear is the only true enemy, born of ignorance and the parent of anger and hate. And as of right here on this graph, you can see that 2/3 of students use the internet, and the classroom instruction on the First Amendment went down by 8%. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Two questions I have for you.
Yes, sir.
First up, what evidence did you gather that you didn't use?
I gathered some evidence on religion. I gathered some evidence on the way that social behaviors happen in the classroom and how arguments escalate. I didn't use that in my presentation.
And second question, what advice would you have for researchers to consider this topic in the future?
If you're researching this topic in the future, I would suggest to not do what I did at certain times and just go with the flow, to kind of not just settle for whatever is given to you or just settle for the very easy way of agreeing with the court cases. Kind of fight against the grain at certain parts and use your brain a little bit to see the different arguments and not just ignore them because it is the easy way out.
All right, thank you.